The grand palace of Velthoria stood tall under the crimson sky, its golden spires reflecting the light of the twin moons. Inside, the halls were quiet, almost too quiet, as the night stretched deep into the shadows. Queen Scifi, dressed in her royal robes, stood by the tall glass window of her chamber, looking down at the vast city below. It was her kingdom now, but something didn't feel right. Tonight was supposed to be a night of celebration. Her coronation had taken place just hours ago. The people had cheered for her, nobles had sworn loyalty, and her husband, Prince Regent Varric, had stood by her side, smiling. But deep inside, Scifi felt uneasy. A strange tension had been growing in the palace ever since her father, the late king, had died suddenly. She had dismissed it as grief, but now she wasn't sure. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Before she could respond, the door burst open, and a figure rushed inside. Captain Darius Kane, the human royal guard, stood there, his chest rising and falling as if he had been running. His sharp blue eyes were filled with urgency. "Your Majesty, you must listen to me. Don't go into your chamber. Your husband wants to kill you." Scifi froze, her heart skipping a beat. Had she heard him correctly? She narrowed her golden eyes at him. "What did you say?" Darius stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Varric is planning to assassinate you tonight. If you enter your chamber, you won't leave it alive." Scifi's breath caught in her throat. Varric, the man she trusted, the man who stood by her side as she took the throne. It sounded impossible. "That's a serious accusation," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "Do you have proof?" Darius clenched his jaw. "I overheard his private guards talking. They were discussing how to cover up your tragic death. They planned to make it look like an accident." Scifi wanted to dismiss it, to call it nonsense, but deep inside, a part of her whispered that it made sense. Her father had died too suddenly. The royal council had been too eager to push her into marriage with Varric, and now her loyal human guard was risking everything to warn her. "I need to see Varric myself," she said, moving towards the door. Darius blocked her path. "That's exactly what they want. The moment you're alone with him, it's over. We have to leave. Now." Scifi's mind raced. If she left, it would confirm that she believed Darius. If she stayed, she would have to confront Varric and risk walking into a trap. Another thought struck her. Why was Darius, a human, risking his life for her? She had always seen him as just another soldier in her guard, an outsider among her people. Yet here he was, warning her of betrayal when even her own advisors had said nothing. She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. She found none. Darius Kane was many things, rough, stubborn, and overly bold, but he was not a liar. A sudden loud boom echoed through the palace, shaking the walls. The ground trembled under their feet. Scifi turned toward the window in shock. Dark smoke was rising from the lower levels of the palace. Darius cursed under his breath. "That's the signal. The attack has started." Her blood ran cold. The doors to the hall burst open, and two heavily armed Velthorian guards stormed in. Their armor gleamed under the dim palace lights, their weapons drawn. "The queen is in danger. Protect her," one of them shouted. But Scifi wasn't fooled. The way they moved, the way their eyes darted toward Darius. They weren't here to protect her. They were here to finish her. Darius moved faster than she expected. With a single sharp movement, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her behind him. "Get ready to run," he whispered. The first guard lunged, swinging his blade. Darius dodged, countering with a quick strike of his own. The clash of metal rang through the chamber. The second guard aimed at Scifi, but she reacted instinctively, grabbing the ceremonial dagger from her belt. She had never used it for anything other than tradition, but tonight it would be for survival. Darius knocked one guard unconscious, his human strength proving more than a match for the alien warriors. He turned to Scifi. "Move." She didn't need to be told twice. Barefoot and breathless, she ran, her royal robes billowing behind her as she followed Darius through the palace corridors. Behind them, alarms blared. The castle was no longer a place of safety. It was a battlefield. Zyra's heart pounded as she realized something chilling. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a coup. Varric wasn't just trying to kill her. He was taking the throne. A masked figure, dressed in black armor, stepped forward. His voice was calm but deadly. "The king sends his regards." Without another word, chaos erupted. The assassins lunged forward, blades flashing. Darius met them head-on, blocking a strike and countering with deadly precision. He moved like a storm, cutting down enemies with fierce efficiency. Terran fought beside him, using his knowledge of the caves to maneuver through the ice, striking from the shadows. The rebels engaged in battle, but the assassins were well-trained and relentless. Zyra, armed with her dagger, defended herself as one of the assassins lunged at her. She dodged, striking back with fierce determination. She was not just a queen. She was a warrior now. Darius shouted over the battle, "We have to reach the ships." Zyra turned and saw the control panel of the lead warship, covered in frost but still intact. If they could get inside, they could use the ships to escape. "Cover me," she commanded. Darius and Terran fought their way toward her, cutting down enemies as they went. Zyra sprinted to the ship, placing her hand against the control panel. The ancient metal glowed under her touch, responding to her royal bloodline. The ship hummed to life, its systems activating after centuries of silence. The assassins hesitated. They had not expected this. Zyra's voice echoed through the cave. "This fleet belongs to Velthoria, and I am still its queen." Victory and escape. With a final surge of energy, the ship's weapons came online. The entire fleet began to power up, their engines shaking the ground beneath them. Darius smirked. "Now this is what I call a game changer." The assassins realized they were outmatched. Some tried to flee, but the rebels pushed them back, forcing them to retreat. Zyra turned to her people. "We take these ships, and we take back our kingdom." The rebels cheered. The battle wasn't over, but they had gained something Varric could never have predicted: a fleet strong enough to challenge his rule. As they boarded the warships, preparing for the fight ahead, Zyra knew one thing. The final battle for Velthoria had begun. The ancient warships, sleek and powerful, rose from the frozen ground of the ice caves. Their engines hummed, casting a faint blue glow that reflected off the icy walls. Queen Zyra stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, her golden eyes fierce. This was her moment. Darius Kane stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Zyra didn't turn to look at him. Instead, she kept her gaze on the massive view screen that displayed the frozen landscape outside. Varric's forces were waiting for her at the palace. "I was born ready," she replied, her voice steady. Terran Jex, seated at the controls, looked up. "The fleet's systems are fully operational, but we'll need time to learn how to control them properly." Zyra clenched her fists. "We don't have time, Terran. If we wait, Varric will tighten his grip. We move now." Terran nodded, though his expression was tense. "Understood, my queen." The fleet began to ascend, the ground rumbling as the long-buried warships emerged into the open air. The icy winds howled, but the engines roared louder. Varric's last stand. Back in the palace, Varric sat on the throne he had stolen, watching as his soldiers prepared for battle. The royal guards were lined up, their armor shining, their weapons polished. He would not give up the throne easily. An officer approached, saluting. "Sire, the rebels are coming. They have ships, ancient Velthorian ships." Varric's green eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Those ships were lost centuries ago." The officer hesitated. "They are not lost anymore. The queen, she has them." Varric stood, his cloak billowing behind him. "Then we will crush her. She thinks these old machines will save her, But she forgets who holds the palace, the city, the people. He raised his hand, signaling to his commanders, "Prepare our defenses. When she comes, we will show her no mercy." The battle for Galthoria. As Styra's fleet approached the capital, the city below was alive with panic. Citizens fled to their homes, while soldiers took up defensive positions on the palace walls. The once proud streets of Velthoria had become a war zone. Varric turned back to the city, his expression cold. Zyra thought she could fight back. She was wrong. Escape through the city. The ancient chamber had another exit, leading Tyra, Darius, and Terran into the lower levels of the city. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and burning torches as they navigated the maze of underground tunnels. Finally, they emerged into the outskirts, where the city met the desert. The streets were quiet, but tension filled the air. Varric's soldiers were everywhere, searching. "We need disguises," Darius said. Terran led them to an old marketplace where traders were closing their stalls. They found a merchant who owed Terran a favor, a former soldier who had lost everything under Varric's rule. He provided them with cloaks and supplies. Zyra pulled the hood over her head, feeling the weight of the fabric settle over her shoulders. She was a queen in exile now. As they prepared to leave, a sudden shout rang out. "There! That's them!" Soldiers spotted them. Darius cursed. "Run!" They sprinted through the narrow streets, dodging carts and startled civilians. Arrows whizzed past them as soldiers gave chase. Terran led them toward an old bridge over the river. "We can lose them in the fog." They dashed across the bridge, but the enemy was close. One soldier leaped forward, grabbing Cyrus' cloak. She spun, slashing with her dagger, her blade finding its mark. The soldier stumbled back, giving her just enough time to keep running. Darius fought off two more, his human strength overpowering them. "Go, don't stop." They reached the other side and disappeared into the mist. A moment of rest. Hours later, they stopped in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower. Zyra sat down, catching her breath. She looked at Darius, who was checking his wounds. "You saved me back there," she said. Darius smirked. "That's my job." Zyra studied him for a moment. This human, once just another guard, had risked everything for her. She turned to Terran. "How much further to the stronghold?" Terran gazed at the distant mountains. "By morning, we'll be in the wildlands. If we survive the night, we'll make it." Zyra nodded, her heart steady. She had lost her throne, but not her will to fight. She looked at Darius and Terran. "Velthoria is mine, and I will take it back." The night air was cold as Queen Zyra, Captain Darius Kane, and Terran Jex moved through the wildlands beyond the city. The towering mountains in the distance were their destination, where the forgotten stronghold was said to be hidden. The road ahead was dangerous. Varric's forces would be searching for them. Every step forward brought both hope and risk. Darius glanced at Zyra as they walked. "You doing okay?" Zyra pulled her cloak tighter around her. She was exhausted, but she refused to show weakness. "I'm fine. We keep moving." Terran, leading the way, suddenly stopped and raised a hand. "Someone's coming." The three of them ducked behind the thick trees as a group of armored figures approached from the darkness. Darius gripped his sword. "Enemies." Terran squinted. "No, rebels." Zyra's heart pounded. If these were rebels loyal to her, she had a chance to rebuild her forces. The leader of the group, a strong Velthorian woman with deep scars on her face, stepped forward. "Who are you?" Andorra lowered her hood, letting the dim moonlight illuminate her face. The rebels gasped in shock. "The Queen. She's alive." A dangerous alliance. The rebel leader, Commander Ryla, led them into a hidden underground shelter beneath the mountains. The chamber was filled with warriors, Velthorians who had refused to serve Varric's rule. Zyra stood before them, her voice strong. "Varric has taken the throne by force. He will destroy our people and sell our world to off-worlders for his own gain. She raised her chin. I will not let him. But I need your help. The grand palace of Velthoria stood tall under the crimson sky, its golden spires reflecting the light of the twin moons. Inside, the halls were quiet, almost too quiet, as the night stretched deep into the shadows. Queen Scifi, dressed in her royal robes, stood by the tall glass window of her chamber, looking down at the vast city below. It was her kingdom now, but something didn't feel right. Tonight was supposed to be a night of celebration. Her coronation had taken place just hours ago. The people had cheered for her, nobles had sworn loyalty, and her husband, Prince Regent Varric, had stood by her side, smiling. But deep inside, Scifi felt uneasy. A strange tension had been growing in the palace ever since her father, the late king, had died suddenly. She had dismissed it as grief, but now she wasn't sure. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Before she could respond, the door burst open, and a figure rushed inside. Captain Darius Kane, the human royal guard, stood there, his chest rising and falling as if he had been running. His sharp blue eyes were filled with urgency. Your Majesty, you must listen to me. Don't go into your chamber. Your husband wants to kill you. Scifi froze, her heart skipping a beat. Had she heard him correctly? She narrowed her golden eyes at him. What did you say? Darius stepped closer, lowering his voice. Varric is planning to assassinate you tonight. If you enter your chamber, you won't leave it alive. Scifi's breath caught in her throat. Varric, the man she trusted, the man who stood by her side as she took the throne. It sounded impossible. That's a serious accusation, she said, her voice firm but controlled. Do you have proof? Darius clenched his jaw. I overheard his private guards talking. They were discussing how to cover up your tragic death. They planned to make it look like an accident. Scifi wanted to dismiss it, to call it nonsense, but deep inside, a part of her whispered that it made sense. Her father had died too suddenly. The royal council had been too eager to push her into marriage with Varric, and now her loyal human guard was risking everything to warn her. I need to see Varric myself, she said, moving towards the door. Darius blocked her path. That's exactly what they want. The moment you're alone with him, it's over. We have to leave. Now. Scifi's mind raced. If she left, it would confirm that she believed Darius. If she stayed, she would have to confront Varric and risk walking into a trap. Another thought struck her. Why was Darius, a human, risking his life for her? She had always seen him as just another soldier in her guard, an outsider among her people. Yet here he was, warning her of betrayal when even her own advisors had said nothing. She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. She found none. Darius Kane was many things, rough, stubborn, and overly bold, but he was not a liar. A sudden loud boom echoed through the palace, shaking the walls. The ground trembled under their feet. Scifi turned toward the window in shock. Dark smoke was rising from the lower levels of the palace. Darius cursed under his breath. That's the signal. The attack has started. Her blood ran cold. The doors to the hall burst open, and two heavily armed Velthorian guards stormed in. Their armor gleamed under the dim palace lights, their weapons drawn. The queen is in danger. Protect her, one of them shouted. But Scifi wasn't fooled. The way they moved, the way their eyes darted toward Darius. They weren't here to protect her. They were here to finish her. Darius moved faster than she expected. With a single sharp movement, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her behind him. Get ready to run, he whispered. The first guard lunged, swinging his blade. Darius dodged, countering with a quick strike of his own. The clash of metal rang through the chamber. The second guard aimed at Scifi, but she reacted instinctively, grabbing the ceremonial dagger from her belt. She had never used it for anything other than tradition, but tonight it would be for survival. Darius knocked one guard unconscious, his human strength proving more than a match for the alien warriors. He turned to Zyra. Move. She didn't need to be told twice. Barefoot and breathless, she ran, her royal robes billowing behind her as she followed Darius through the palace corridors. Behind them, alarms blared. The castle was no longer a place of safety. It was a battlefield. Zyra's heart pounded as she realized something chilling. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a coup. Varric wasn't just trying to kill her. He was taking the throne. Terran looked at her, determination in his gaze. If you are still alive, then Velthoria still has a queen. I will serve you. Darius nodded slowly. Then let's move before they find us. The chase. They continued deeper into the tunnels, but time was running out. Zyra could hear footsteps above. The guards were searching for them. Then a loud crash shook the ground. Varric's forces had found the entrance. They're coming, Terran warned. Darius cursed. We need to move faster. They ran, the tunnel stretching endlessly before them. The exit had to be close. Another explosion shook the walls. Zyra stumbled, catching herself against Darius. There. Terran pointed ahead. A massive stone door stood at the tunnel's end. Ancient symbols glowed faintly on its surface. Darius rushed forward, pressing his hands against the door. There's a hidden lever. Help me find it. Zyra and Terran searched frantically as the sound of approaching soldiers grew louder. Then, click. The door rumbled. Dust fell from the ceiling. With a deep groan, it slid open, revealing the hidden chamber. Darius pulled Zyra inside, just as arrows flew past them, hitting the walls. Terran followed, and the door slammed shut behind them. Silence. Zyra's breath was heavy as she turned to face the new chamber. Ancient statues lined the walls, and in the center, a long-forgotten map of Velthoria was carved into the stone. Darius took a deep breath. We're safe. For now. Zyra straightened her back, her golden eyes burning with resolve. Varric thought she was dead. He thought he had won. But he had made a mistake. She was still alive, and she was going to take back her throne. The ancient chamber was cold and silent, its walls covered in strange carvings and forgotten symbols. Dim light from the glowing symbols flickered across Queen Zyra's face as she studied the large stone map in the center of the room. This place was more than just a hiding spot. It was a part of Velthoria's lost history. Darius Kane stood nearby, sword in hand, his ears sharp for any sound of pursuit. Terran Jex, the former royal guard who had joined them, knelt beside the map, tracing the lines with his fingers. This place, Terran whispered, it's older than the palace itself. The symbols speak of a hidden stronghold outside the city. Zyra frowned. A stronghold. I've never heard of it. Terran nodded, because the royal family buried its existence centuries ago. Only those truly loyal to Velthoria knew about it. He pointed to a location near the mountains. If we can reach this place, we might find allies. Darius crossed his arms. Then we need to move. Varric's forces will be searching for us. Sarah straightened, her golden eyes burning with determination. Varric may have taken my throne, but I will not let him take my people. If this stronghold exists, we will find it. She turned to Darius. How far is it? A 2-day journey, Darius said. If we move fast. Terran exhaled. Then we need supplies, weapons, and a way out of the city. Zyra clenched her fists. Escaping the palace was only the beginning. Now, the real battle was ahead. Meanwhile, in the palace, Varric stood on the grand balcony of the royal palace, overlooking the city. The night was still, but inside the halls, soldiers moved like shadows, hunting for a queen who was supposed to be dead. A Velthorian officer approached, bowing deeply. My lord, the tunnels have been searched, but there is no sign of the queen's body. Varric's jaw tightened. Then she's alive. The officer hesitated. It is possible, my lord. Some of the older tunnels are unstable, perhaps. Perhaps nothing. Varric turned, his piercing green eyes narrowing. Xera is not the type to die easily. She has escaped, which means she will try to gather support. He stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. Find her. Search the city, the outskirts, everywhere. She cannot be allowed to rally the people against me. The officer bowed again and hurried away. Terran nodded. But we must be careful. Varric will know we're searching for something. He won't sit back and wait. Xera clenched her fists. Let him come. We'll be ready. Varric's growing fear. Back in the royal palace, King Varric sat in the grand throne room, staring at the reports in his hand. His spies had failed to kill Xera. Worse, the rebels were growing stronger. A trusted advisor, Lord Malric, approached. The queen is alive. The people are whispering. Some doubt your rule. Varric's grip tightened on his chair. Then we remind them who their king is. Malric hesitated. There is more. She searches for something. Something hidden in the ice caves. Varric's expression darkened. She knows about the fleet. Malric nodded. If she reaches it, she will have the power to overthrow you. Varric rose from his throne, his cloak billowing behind him. Then she must not reach it. He turned to his guards. Send my best hunters. I want her dead before she even steps foot in those caves. Journey to the ice caves. The rebels moved quickly. Xera, Darius, Terran, and a small group of fighters traveled toward the north, pushing through frozen valleys and harsh winds. Darius walked beside Xera, watching her carefully. You don't have to do this alone. Xera glanced at him. I know. She appreciated his presence. Darius had saved her life more times than she could count. He was human, but he had proven himself stronger and more loyal than most Velforians. We're close, Terran announced, pointing ahead. The entrance to the ice caves loomed before them, massive icicles hanging like frozen daggers. Xera took a deep breath. If the fleet was real, it was inside. If they failed, there was no turning back. Darius unsheathed his sword. Let's finish this. The rebels stepped forward, but danger was already waiting in the shadows. The entrance to the ice caves loomed before them like the mouth of a frozen beast. Massive icicles hung from the ceiling, shimmering in the dim light. A cold wind howled through the valley, carrying the scent of snow and danger. Queen Xera, Darius Kane, Terran Jex, and the small group of rebels stepped cautiously inside. Their breath turned to mist as the temperature dropped. The walls of the cave were covered in thick layers of ice, reflecting their torches like a hall of mirrors. We have to move quickly, Terran whispered. Varric's spies may already be following us. Xera nodded. Then let's find the fleet before they do. They walked deeper into the cave, their footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. The ancient text had spoken of warships buried beneath the ice, waiting for a true Velforian heir to awaken them. Xera could feel something, a strange pull, as if the cave itself was calling to her. Darius walked beside her, his sword ready. Do you really think these ships are real? Xera met his gaze. I have to believe. If we don't find them, we have no chance against Varric. Terran, leading the way, suddenly stopped. Look! Before them was a massive frozen wall. Inside the ice, they could see something enormous, the shape of a ship buried for centuries. Xera's breath caught in her throat. It's real. The awakening of the fleet. Terran stepped closer, pressing his hand against the ice. The ships are still intact. If we can get inside, we might be able to activate them. Darius glanced around. How do we do that? Xera studied the ice, then looked down at the royal sigil on her wrist, a symbol of Velforian heritage, passed down through generations. She stepped forward, placing her palm against the frozen surface. A sudden pulse of energy surged through the air. The ice began to crack, glowing lines spreading outward like lightning. The rebels stepped back as the cave shook, ice breaking apart in massive chunks. Then, with a final thunderous crack, The ice shattered completely, revealing the lost warships. The rebels gasped. Huge, sleek ships, built from a metal that shimmered in the dim light, stood silent and waiting. They were unlike anything seen in centuries, weapons of a forgotten era, hidden away for this very moment. Terran's voice was filled with awe. "They were waiting for you, my queen." Zaira stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Then let's bring them back to life." But before she could take another step, arrows flew through the air. Varric's assassins attack. Darius pushed Zaira aside just in time, an arrow narrowly missing her shoulder. The rebels turned as dozens of shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. Varric's assassins had found them. Zaira's voice rang out across the ship's communication system. "People of Velthoria, hear me. I am Zaira, your queen. Varric has taken the throne through treachery, but I am here to reclaim what is rightfully ours. Stand with me, and we will free our world." Darius watched her, impressed by the fire in her words. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a leader. The battle began with a thunderous roar. The warships unleashed their firepower, targeting the palace's defenses. Towers crumbled, walls shattered, and Varric's soldiers were forced to retreat. The ancient technology of the fleet was far more advanced than anything Varric had. Darius led a team of rebels on the ground, cutting through the enemy ranks with precision and skill. Terran stayed aboard the ship, working with the other rebels to keep the fleet in the air. As the fight raged on, Zaira's ship descended, landing in the courtyard of the palace. The remaining soldiers tried to block her path, but Darius and his team cleared the way. Zaira stepped out, her dagger in hand. This was it, the final confrontation. Queen versus usurper. Inside the grand throne room, Varric stood waiting. His armor gleamed, his sword drawn. He had prepared for this moment. Zaira walked in, her steps echoing in the silent hall. She stopped a few feet from the throne, her golden eyes locked on Varric's green ones. "You betrayed my family, my people," she said, her voice calm but cold. "Now you will answer for it." Varric smirked. "You should have stayed hidden. You think a few old ships and a handful of rebels will be enough to stop me. You're still just a child playing queen." Zaira didn't reply. Instead, she raised her dagger, ready to fight. Varric lunged first, his sword slashing through the air. Zaira dodged, moving with the speed and precision of someone who had been trained for this moment. She countered, her dagger striking against his blade. The two clashed, their movements fast and fierce. Sparks flew as their weapons met. Zaira felt the weight of the crown she was fighting for, the burden of her people's hope. Varric fought with anger, but Zaira fought with purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for Velthoria. In the end, it was her determination that won. With a final powerful strike, she disarmed Varric, sending his sword clattering to the ground. He fell to his knees, breathing heavily. "It doesn't matter," he sneered. "You'll never hold this throne. You're too weak." Zaira raised her dagger, her hand steady. But instead of delivering the final blow, she lowered it. "I don't need to prove anything to you, Varric. You've already lost." Darius entered the throne room, his sword still drawn. He glanced at Zaira, then at Varric. "It's over." Zaira nodded. "It's over." Victory and hope. By the time the sun rose over Velthoria, the battle was won. Varric's forces had surrendered, and the city was free. Zaira stood before the gathered crowd, the crown of her ancestors in her hands. She placed it on her head, looking out at her people. They cheered, their voices filling the air with hope. Darius stood beside her, his usual smirk replaced by a look of respect. "You did it." Zaira looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "No, we did it." The war was over, but the rebuilding was just beginning. Zaira had reclaimed her throne, but she knew the real work lay ahead. With Darius, Terran, and her people by her side, she was ready. Velthoria had a queen again, and she would not fail her kingdom. And if she wanted to survive, she had to escape first. Then she had to fight back. She looked at Darius, the only person in the entire palace who had chosen to stand by her side. "Where are we going?" she asked as they ran. Darius glanced at her with determination. "Somewhere safe. Then we take back your kingdom." The cold night air hit Queen Cyrus' face as she and Captain Darius Kane ran through the dark corridors of the palace. The echoes of distant shouts and clashing weapons filled the halls. Smoke drifted from the lower floors, the smell of burning fabric and metal stinging her nose. Darius led her down a hidden passageway, moving swiftly through the shadows. Cyrus struggled to keep up, her royal robes slowing her down. "Wait," she whispered, breathless. She reached down and ripped off the lower half of her long gown, making it easier to move. Darius gave her a quick nod of approval. "Good. We don't have much time." Footsteps pounded behind them. The guards were closing in. Zyra's heart pounded in her chest. Just hours ago, she had been standing before her people, wearing the royal crown. Now she was running for her life, hunted like a criminal in her own palace. She turned to Darius as they moved through the darkened hallways. "How do you know about these tunnels?" "I've been a guard here for years," Darius replied. "Humans like me were never trusted with power, so we learned to survive in other ways. I studied every inch of this palace. I knew one day I'd need an escape route." Zyra frowned. "You always planned to escape." "Not for myself." Darius glanced at her. "For a day like this. For you." Zyra was silent. She had always seen Darius as just another soldier. Now he was the only person she could trust. They reached an old wooden door at the end of the hallway. Darius pushed it open, revealing a narrow stone staircase leading downward. "Go," he urged. Zyra hesitated. This tunnel led to the ancient lower chambers, a place most Velthorians feared. It was said to be cursed, filled with ghosts of the past. But she had no choice. She stepped inside, Darius following and shutting the door behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole. The forgotten passage. The stone walls were damp, the air thick with dust. Zyra's fingers brushed against the rough walls as they moved deeper into the underground tunnels. "Where does this lead?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's an exit in the old ruins beneath the city," Darius said. "It's been sealed for years, but I know a way to open it." Zyra exhaled slowly. If they could escape into the ruins, they would be outside the palace grounds. But then what? Varric had likely already declared her dead. Her enemies would be searching for her everywhere. "What if we don't make it?" she asked, more to herself than to Darius. He didn't stop moving. "Then we die fighting." Zyra clenched her jaw. She refused to let Varric win that easily. They pressed forward, their steps echoing in the silent tunnels. Then, a noise. Darius stopped suddenly, raising a hand. Zyra froze. A whisper. Someone else was in the tunnel. Darius drew his weapon. Zyra reached for her dagger. Then, a shadow moved ahead. A figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a Velthorian man in worn-out armor. His face was scared, his eyes wary. "Who are you?" Zyra demanded, keeping her voice steady. The man hesitated, then his eyes widened in shock. "Queen Zyra." She stiffened. "You know me." The man dropped to one knee. "I thought you were dead." Darius kept his weapon ready. "Who are you?" "My name is Terran Jex. I was once a royal guard before Varric took control. He had me imprisoned for questioning his rule." Zyra exchanged a look with Darius. Could they trust him? "Why are you here?" she asked. Terran exhaled. "I escaped before the coup started. I've been hiding here, waiting for a chance to fight back." Zyra felt a spark of hope. "Then we have the same goal."